One day, they're laughing with you under the warmth of connection, and the next, they're gone like mist under sunlight. You replay the moments, search the texts, and wonder if you said something wrong. But the truth is, sometimes, people disappear not because of you, but because of what's happening inside of them. This is the psychology of people who suddenly disappear. They don't vanish out of cruelty, but out of overwhelm. In the quiet act of disappearance, there lies a story untold, not one of malice, but of a soul seeking refuge. To ghost, to vanish, is not always a choice carved from arrogance or indifference. It is for many a retreat, a quiet surrender to the weight of a world that presses too heavily upon them. Imagine a mind where thoughts collide like tempests, where emotions swell like waves too vast to contain, where the heart, exhausted from its own fervent beating, can no longer muster the strength to articulate its turmoil. For those who disappear, their silence is not a weapon but a shield, a fragile attempt to preserve what little remains of their inner peace. The act of ghosting is less about the other and more about the self. A self drowning in the cacophony of expectation, connection, and the relentless demands of intimacy. When reality weaves itself into knots too intricate to unravel, when every conversation feels like a labyrinth with no exit, silence becomes their only language. It's not that they don't care. Rather, it's that caring has become a burden too heavy to bear. The weight of explaining, of justifying, of navigating another's emotions alongside their own. It's a storm they cannot weather. So they retreat, slipping into the shadows not out of disdain but out of desperation for air. For a moment to breathe without the world's incessant clamor. In this retreat, there is a paradox. The act of disappearing is both an escape and a confinement. They flee to find peace, yet they carry their chaos within. The world outside may see their absence as cold, as a deliberate severing of ties. But within, it's a plea for survival. To them, the quiet of absence feels like a sanctuary, a place where the noise of expectation and obligation cannot reach. They don't vanish to wound others but to protect themselves from a reality that feels too loud, too demanding, too overwhelming to endure. In their silence, they seek not to erase connection but to pause it, to find a fleeting moment where they can exist without the weight of the world pressing down, where they can simply be unseen, unheard, but finally, for a moment, at peace. In the heart of those who ghost lies a quiet dread, not of connection itself, but of the jagged edges of confrontation. To vanish is not a careless act, but a calculated retreat from the daunting prospect of facing another's pain, questions, or expectations. Deep within, they harbor no desire to wound. They are not architects of cruelty. Yet, the thought of standing in the storm of a goodbye, of articulating the tangled mess of their own emotions, feels like an insurmountable cliff. They fear confrontation more than the void of absence, for confrontation demands clarity. And they often lack a clarity to name the chaos swirling in their minds, to explain why their heart pulls away when it still longs to care. To say goodbye is to open a door to questions they cannot answer, to emotions they scarcely understand themselves. It means facing the hurt in another's eyes, hearing the tremor in their voice, and carrying the weight of causing pain. So, they choose silence instead, slipping away like a shadow under moonlight, hoping time will weave the explanations they cannot. They vanish quietly, suddenly, believing that absence might speak more gently than words ever could. But this choice, this flight into silence, is not without its toll. Avoidance carries a price, one that lingers long after the act. The connections they leave behind do not dissolve. They freeze, suspended in a liminal space where questions hang unanswered and bonds remain unresolved. The ghost in their retreat is not free from consequence. Guilt becomes their silent companion, a heavy echo that reverberates through their solitude. They carry the weight of those left behind. The unspoken words, the imagined pain, the connections left to fray in their absence. What they hoped would be a clean break becomes a haunting, a reminder that silence does not erase but merely postpones. The ones who ghost are not untouched by their choice. They feel the ripples of their departure, the quiet ache of knowing they've left something unresolved. In their flight from confrontation, they trade one burden for another, carrying the ghost of guilt through the quiet spaces they sought to find peace in, forever shadowed by the connections they could not face. For those who ghost, disappearance is not merely an act of avoidance but a finely honed art of emotional self-preservation. Ghosting at its core is less about the people left behind and more about the survival of the one who vanishes. These are souls who, perhaps too early in life, learned a bitter lesson. Attachment is a doorway to pain, and vulnerability is an invitation for wounds to form. The world has taught them, through betrayals or heartaches, that to open oneself is to risk being broken. So, they slip away quietly, preemptively, before the sting of rejection can find them, before disappointment can settle into their bones. Their absence is not born of indifference but of a deep, instinctual need to shield themselves from harm. To ghost is to act on a hard-won instinct, a defense mechanism forged in the fires of past hurts. They disappear not because they lack care, but because they fear the cost of caring too deeply. In their minds, love and connection shimmer like fragile glass, beautiful, yes, but perilous, each step threatening to cut. They convince themselves that by withdrawing, they are safeguarding their peace, preserving the delicate balance of a heart that has already endured too much. Yet, in truth, they are guarding scars that have never fully healed, protecting wounds they cannot bear to see reopened. To them, every relationship is a tightrope walk, where trust feels like a gamble too dangerous to take. This self-preservation, though, comes with its own quiet tragedy. In their effort to shield themselves, they build walls not only against others but within their own hearts. They may walk away believing they've escaped pain, but they carry the weight of isolation, the ache of connections severed before they could bloom. Ghosting becomes their armor, but it is heavy, forged from fear rather than freedom. They are masters of this art, yes, but it is a mastery born of necessity, not choice. A reflex to retreat before the world can hurt them first. In their silent departure, they seek safety, but they leave behind a trail of what-ifs, a lingering question of whether love could ever be more than glass underfoot. Beautiful but too treacherous to trust. In the hearts of those who ghost lies a restless duality, a tension between yearning and retreat, a delicate dance between connection and escape. They are souls caught in a paradox, craving the warmth of intimacy yet trembling at the thought of being truly seen. They long for love, for the soft pulse of belonging, but they also hunger for control, the safety of dictating the terms of their vulnerability. This inner conflict casts them as wanderers between two worlds, one where they weave themselves into the fabric of another's life, and another where they vanish, leaving only echoes behind. Their existence is a tightrope strung between the desire to be known and the instinct to flee when the light of exposure grows too bright. When they open up, it is with a depth that feels like a gift, a rare glimpse into their soul, unguarded and raw. In those moments, they are fully present, listening to the cadence of another's heart, sharing in the quiet beauty of connection. But this openness is fleeting, a candle that burns brightly before flickering out. The next morning, they may be gone, unreachable, as if the night's intimacy was a dream that dissolved with dawn. This disappearance is not a sign of apathy, it is the opposite. They feel too much, too intensely, and that flood of emotion becomes a tide they cannot navigate. To stay would mean risking the chaos of feeling, the vulnerability of being tethered to another's expectations, so they choose escape instead, retreating to a place where they can regain control. This dance is not without its cost. Living between connection and escape means never fully inhabiting either. They leave behind fragments of themselves in the hearts they touch, but they also carry the weight of their own fleeting presence. Each disappearance is a small fracture, a reminder of the intimacy they crave but cannot sustain. They are not cold, not unfeeling. Rather, they are overwhelmed by the intensity of their own emotions, driven to retreat by the very depth that draws others to them. In their silent exits, they seek not to sever but to survive. Forever caught in the liminal space between the longing to belong and the safety of solitude. So, the next time someone disappears without a word, don't rush to call them heartless. Sometimes, silence is their way of saying, "I don't know how to stay without hurting you or myself." The ghosting mindset isn't born from apathy. It's often born from unhealed battles, from the fear of being too much or not enough. They disappear to protect their peace, but in doing so, they often lose a piece of themselves too.